Good evening, visitors, and welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Michael Manfield. We warmly welcome the family of Sergeant Henry William Mortimer, whose story will be told shortly. This evening, we also warmly welcome Colonel Ryan Sonza, Assistant Chief of Air Staff, Philippine Air Force, and Mrs. Maria Sonza, accompanied by Group Captain Lee Dunnett, Director Air Force International Engagement, and the accompanying delegation, and the delegation from the Royal Australian Naval College, HMAS Creswell. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those who are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony from across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of Melrose Park Public School from West Ryde in New South Wales. If you're able and comfortable to do so, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is but by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Students, others, please be seated if able. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant Henry William Mortimer. Henry Mortimer was born on the 24th of January 1898 in the Sydney suburb of Double Bay. Known as Harry, he was the eldest of 3 children born to Henry and Jane Mortimer, who ran the Royal Oak Hotel. Harry received his education at Double Bay Public School and later went on to work as a mechanic. He was a keen musician and played the cornet in a local band. On the 19th of January 1924, Harry met his sweetheart, Veronica Phelps, in a ceremony. Harry married his sweetheart, Veronica Phelps, in a ceremony at St. Mark's Anglican Church at Darling Point. They settled in the suburb of Balmain and welcomed 6 children: Frederick, Gordon, Kevin, Eileen, Francis, and Joan. After marrying, Harry joined the ambulance service to provide a more stable income for his family. He was involved in several notable rescues, including that of an injured worker from the Sydney Harbour Bridge and victims from a capsized ferry. When the Second World War broke out, Harry was working as an ambulance officer at Canterbury District Hospital. Harry Mortimer enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 18th of June 1940. At this time, the maximum age for enlisted men was 40. Harry gave his birth year as 1900, shaving 2 years off his age so he would be eligible to join. He was accepted and began training in Sydney before being allocated to the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance in July 1940. He rose through the ranks quickly, initially being made acting corporal and then acting sergeant at the end of the year. By 1941, Mortimer's unit was ready to deploy. During his final period of leave, he asked his children what souvenir they would like from Singapore, and his youngest daughter, Joan, requested a monkey. Mortimer embarked later that month and sailed from Sydney on the troop ship Marnix van St. Aldegon. Mortimer arrived in Singapore on the 15th of August 1941 and was detached for service at a convalescence depot. He remained there until September, when his rank was confirmed and he returned to the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance. Mortimer attempted to fulfill his daughter's wish to receive a monkey and sent her a postcard with a young girl and some monkeys on it. On the back he wrote, "Dear Joan, hope you like the monkeys in this picture. Love from Daddy." Japan entered the war and began landing forces on the north coast of Malaya on the 8th of December 1941. Japanese forces advanced rapidly, outnumbering and outmaneuvering Allied units, which were forced into a fighting withdrawal. Detachments from the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance accompanied infantry units during the fighting and maintained medical facilities on the island as Allied forces were pushed back towards Singapore. By the end of January 1942, Allied troops had completely withdrawn to Singapore Island and were involved in desperate fighting to defend it. The scattered forces that remained were unable to hold back the Japanese when they began their attack on Singapore on the 8th of February. Within a week, they were forced to surrender. Singapore fell to the Japanese on the 15th of February, 1942. Some 15,000 Australian troops were among the tens of thousands of British soldiers to become prisoners of war. Among them was Sergeant Harry Mortimer. Mortimer and his comrades were placed in a prisoner of war camp at Changi, where they remained for several months. Mortimer worked at the Australian General Hospital in Singapore, providing medical care to the sick and wounded. By May 1942, however, his health had begun to decline, and he was admitted to hospital for treatment. There he found he was suffering from beriberi, a disease caused by nutrient deficiency. He remained in hospital until June, when he rejoined the rest of the 2nd of the 10th Field Ambulance. Less than a month later, the Japanese began sending working parties to different overseas locations to complete major building projects. Despite being weakened by his illness, Sergeant Mortimer was called up for a working party in July and was sent to Borneo as part of B Force to work on the construction of a new Japanese airstrip at Sandakan. The prisoners made their camp nearby, where conditions were initially reasonable. Over time, however, the men were subjected to beatings and torture, as well as starvation when their rations were reduced. Tropical disease, unsanitary living conditions, and malnourishment rapidly took a toll among the men, who were already overworked and exhausted. Mortimer endured these conditions until 1944. Allied forces had gained the upper hand, but moves to capture Borneo were still far away. In January 1945, fearful of an Allied invasion, Japanese forces began preparations to move the remaining prisoners. In several groups, the men were made to undertake a series of marches to the town of Renau, some 260 kilometers west of Sandakan. Many of the sick and dying prisoners who could not march were left at Sandakan, where their health continued to decline under the cruelty of their captors. It is believed Mortimer was among this group. In the camps and on the marches, some 1,787 Australians lost their lives between 1942 and the war's end. Among them was Sergeant Harry Mortimer, who died on the 17th of February, 1945. 6 months later, on the 15th of August, the Japanese surrendered to the Allies and the war in the Pacific was won. It is thought that Mortimer was initially buried at Sandakan, No. 1 Cemetery, not far from the camp. When the remains were exhumed after the war, Mortimer's could not be identified. Today, he is commemorated at the Labuan Memorial in Malaysia, among many others, with no known grave. Sergeant Harry Mortimer was 47 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed at the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant Henry William Mortimer, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
If able, please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. at the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.